back on MorningLine. Final segment with our guest, Clint Kelly, medical malpractice attorney, and talking about a broad range of issues. Even if you're not calling in this morning, I hope you're listening and learning. It's you already gave a public service announcement. Get an infection, it's looking red, go to the hospital. Now, as we say, morning fare, toxic transplants.
Yes. Yeah. There are people who need transplants, and transplantation has become a far more common procedure now.
Talking about organs, could be tissue, tendons.
Yeah. Typically, organs are what you're talking about. It could be heart, it could be lung, it could be kidneys, a lot of those. Well, part of the job of the hospital and the transplant team is to ensure that the organ is free of any disease or free of any virus. I mean, that's something you have to make sure of, because once you transplant that, it becomes part of the patient's body. And they have to give these rejection drugs to the patient, which immunocompromises them. Your ability to fend off infections is reduced substantially because you don't want to reject.
Yeah, the body has to accept this organ.
Correct. Correct. And so you'll have I put this up there just because
yeah, they'll see that over there. Yeah,
this is a typical sticker on the what I call the bucket.
Yeah.
That contains it's not a bucket, but we call it that. That contains the organ. So anyway, this was transplanted into a patient's body, and I wish I knew what it was, Nick. I don't know whether it was a kidney or lung, but in any event, patient contracted AIDS. Now, this happened back in the early 90s, like 91 or 92. Patient got AIDS from the transplant and died. And the lawsuit was the failure of the hospital and the transplant team to check the donor to ensure that the donor didn't have HIV. Because at that time, back in the 90s, if a donor had HIV, there was a chance that the organ that was ultimately transplanted in the body would give HIV to the recipient of the transplant. There was a case also against Vanderbilt, very same situation, where a patient got a blood transfusion, and the blood transfusion was donated by an HIV patient, and unfortunately the recipient got AIDS and died. But again, that's part of the hospital's job, is to make sure that whether it's organs or blood, that they're not transmitting into the recipient a virus or a disease that could kill the recipient.
And I'm curious, it's interesting, because I actually did a story on this a while back, I mean, since you were last on, about someone who died of some type of illness that they couldn't fully explain or whatever, but he was also an anatomical donor, and his organs went. And a lot of people messaged me saying, well, Nick, how can they do this when they weren't? And so I was thinking to myself, I guess this is where I kind of say I've got the confidence in the process, but how do hospitals go about making sure that an organ is not infected with something? Is there some purification factor? Do they radiate the heart before they put it in you? Do they take a sample and see if something grows? How do they know?
First of all, you know as much as you can about the donor.
About the donor. You learn as much as you can about the donor.
And I think the technology nowadays, Nick, is even patients who have HIV, if they give blood, there are ways for them to make sure that doesn't get transplanted to a recipient.
Well, Red Cross obviously has ways to make sure the blood supply is safe.
But it's not all Red Cross.
Okay, I was just saying, but when HIV, and if you donor, you know, they have to watch
every major hospital, Vanderbilt's got a blood bank. They got their own blood bank, and so they're responsible for maintaining their blood supply and making sure it's safe before it's used, because a lot of patients require blood during surgery. We don't think about that. When we have surgeries, major surgeries, there's going to be a substantial amount of blood loss in the surgery, so you have to have blood transfusions during the procedure or after the procedure to get your blood supply up. Well, again, it's the hospital, the blood bank's responsibility to ensure that that blood is safe before it's transmitted into the body.
Okay, so but you're just saying, though, that when it comes to an organ, they figure out what this individual died of.
Yes.
And then, but let's just say someone died in a horrible motorcycle crash. Right. So it's not an illness.
And it's during the harvesting.
And so they figure that, okay, but then they harvest it, and then you know what, time is of essence when you harvest it to get it into the new patient. But would you imagine any testing of that organ after they've removed the kidney from the person who died in the motorcycle crash?
Nick, I don't know what the tests are, but I do know the responsibility of the transplant team is to ensure that not only when it's harvested, but also when it's maintained, and then when it's implanted, that it's safe to do that, so that you don't transmit a virus or a disease or some other type of problem to the patient when they get it put in their body. That's part of the hospital's responsibility. And it makes sense. I mean, you know, patient can't do that.
No, and they do some testing because they have to find out if it has a reasonable match, right?
Correct.
When they're matching an organ with someone else's body. You're right. They knock down the immunity system so it can accept it. What else you got in there?
So it's
these pictures are interesting. I mean, just some of the other more common situations that they deal with in malpractice?
Well, I'll tell you one thing I wanted to show a picture because it's a baby.
Okay.
You know, we've had the case before where they gave the wrong patient got the wrong surgery.
Yes.
A baby had a frenulectomy, which is when they clip tongue tie on the baby, and the pediatrician got the babies mixed up and cut the wrong frenulum on the wrong patient, and that was obviously a battery. No defense to that. And the reason it happened was the physician failed to conduct a timeout. And a timeout's when they stop. They say they got their instruments, they put them down, they stop, and the doctor and the nurse or the assistants go, do we have the right patient? Do we have the right instruments? Do we know what the procedure is? And are we operating on the right body part? They have to answer all 4 of those questions, and the informed consent's right there, so they look to make sure they've got the right patient. Every time you do that, you're always going to get the right patient, the right body part.
That's right.
The problem is if you don't follow that 4-step analysis and you shortcut it, then you have increased the risk that you're going to operate on the wrong patient or the wrong body part, and that's what happened with that case that we were involved in Lebanon. Also, though, what I read about, this used to happen a lot, I don't know how much more it happens now, are security breaches with babies where people are coming in stealing babies. And, you know, hospitals now are far more security conscious than they ever used to be for that very reason, because people are coming in and stealing babies. Or mixing them up. You know, sometimes you'd have a baby brought into a mother. It's like, this isn't my baby.
Right. Don't they have them banded now, and they have to beep, and they have to match up, and all of that?
Yes. And so those are things again.
Can't imagine. Or getting the babies mixed up, and the wrong parent getting the wrong baby.
So security now has become a function of the hospitals. They have to have an adequate security system to ensure that they know who the people are coming in, who's going out, and in particular in the neonatal neonatal unit, to make sure that the wrong baby isn't moved or stolen.
You know, we hear about the times when they do those 4, or they fail to do the 4 checks that you just said.
The timeout procedure, yeah.
I wonder how many times they do those 4, and because they did that, they caught, oh, we marked the wrong leg, or you know what? This is Bob and we need Bill.
Yeah, it happens
we don't know that, but I bet you it happens more than you think.
It happens more on the actual body part as opposed to the patient. Yes,
so it'd be like a leg.
They'll mark the left leg when it was supposed to be the right leg that needs the knee replacement. And remember, these people are gowned up, so when the surgeon walks in the room, you know, all he knows is he's got such and such patient and such procedure. He's not looking at the body part and making an instant analysis. Is that the one that needs the knee replacement? Because sometimes you can't tell. So you really count on your records, and you count on your staff to help you to ensure that you don't get it mixed up, because the surgeon's not going to remember, of the thousands of patients they see, which leg and which type of procedure it's going to be. That's why that timeout is crucial to prevent batteries from happening.
So if you're not already put under and you're wheeled in there, if it's you, are you like, Doc, you know you're working on the left leg? I mean, I'm serious. As a patient, I mean, if I'm conscious, I mean, you know me, I don't shut up. And when I go in for a procedure, I mean, I'm asking everything, and up until that point where they, I think, probably are thankfully knocking me out. But I'm asking. I'm going to say, hey, you know what you're doing here today, right? This is not open heart surgery. I'm out here for a colonoscopy. You know, I mean, stuff like that.
Some patients insist on a nerve block. You know what a nerve block is? They can actually put your entire leg to sleep and keep you awake.
Because they want to make sure and stay awake through it. There may be a curtain up so you don't have to watch the blood and gore.
Correctamundo. But see, when the doctor comes in and you're awake, you can make sure that he's operating on the right body part at that point.
A nerve block?
Yeah.
What do you think of that? Nerve blocks?
I would rather be put under.
Yeah.
But there's some people that are very, very sensitive about that and concerned and want to make sure that that's...
But it's enough of a point that they do the nerve block up to the hip, and you will not feel the...
Yeah, it's like women who have epidurals, who give birth. It's the same principle. They just block out a certain nerve or area along the spinal cord down the leg, and it's completely numb, and so the doctor can work on it, and you can stay conscious. And you have that choice. You can ask your anesthesiologist to do that.
Interesting. I'm kind of with you on that, because it probably sounds kind of...
Yeah, I would imagine
I
would imagine they give you Versed or some type of to mellow you out, but at least you have the opportunity to ensure that correct leg is being operated on.
Interesting. All right, Clint, remind folks how they reach you.
Yeah, my phone number is 615-800-0000.
I don't know if I can remember that
Let's
number.
just call it 615-8-million. It's easy to find, or you can find me at kellyfirm.net. We have a staff at our office who will always take calls. I sometimes take them myself. We will always contact you when we make a decision. If we don't take the case, I'll write and explain why I didn't take the case. If we do take the case, then we'll set up a meeting. We can do it either live or by Zoom, and it doesn't cost you anything. The only thing you pay is if I make the call, and if I recover money, that's the only time you have to pay me.
Clint, you left out the fact that the $8 million is the typical settlement you get from clients. Thank you, my friend.
It's on there for a reason, but not that.
Yeah, you'll remember it. Hey, we'll see you again soon. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you very much.
I'll be back at the programming note right after this.